brag of my.
Welcome to the Legendary Upside podcast. My name is Pat Kerrane. You can follow all of my work at legendaryupside.com. Today, I am joined by the men I betrayed at rotoworld.com. Patrick Daugherty, Denny Carter, and Kyle Dvorchak. We're going to be talking through some training camp news and also kind of how to interpret training camp news in general, kind of the prism through which we should be absorbing the facts which are being fire hosed into our brains right now. Guys, how's it going?
You know who else betrayed someone was Cortez and Montezuma.
We were talking the Aztecs before before the show, so you won't know that as the listener, since this is the first you're hearing of it. But that's where that
did them very dirty. But yeah, we're good. We're good. We're getting over your betrayal. We never fully get over it. But
feeling less betrayed as the days goes on.
Well, I have to say, are we on speaking terms? Because I have been kept up to date that I may be joining the Rotoworld podcast by listening to the Rotoworld podcast. I have yet to be invited on by one of you via text or call.
This is not true, Pat.
Apparently, I might be on Thursday.
Pat, this is not true. Sometime in like April or May, I floated the idea to you over a Discord message, like, "Hey, maybe this summer we'll do it." And ever since then, you've been updated only through our podcast.
Yeah. We have been speaking through intermediaries, aka podcast episodes, but we were hoping you could podcast.
You're lucky I'm a loyal listener.
We were hoping you could podcast with us at 3 p.m. Eastern this Thursday.
All right. Well, consider it booked.
All right. Good.
Thanks for.
Wait, is he actually on 3 this?
He is. He is on.
We've actually scheduled you for every Thursday in the regular season.
We have
at 3 o'clock.
I know.
Kind of hoping you can do that.
I can't do any of those actually. All right, so I wanted to talk through some of the training camp stuff. I would say, like, kind of the general theme of this is that, like, in best ball drafts, I felt that the market is very attuned to information, but it is potentially not absorbing that information in ways that feel rational. It's not like my prior was this. I'm updating the prior to reflect this new information, but I'm not abandoning what I previously thought. Instead, it's more like, and we're just running around and, we don't have any kind of sense of what to do. So an example of this would be Isaiah Pacheco went on PUP to begin training camp, and he was known for weeks, months, really, that he would probably miss the beginning of training camp. And his ADP dropped sharply on the news that he missed training camp. So I would say, like, if we can kind of think through some of the bigger picture stuff as we go here, but also dive into the nitty gritty of some of these training camp situations. I actually want to start with the contract issue stuff and where you guys stand on. Let's start with Jonathan Taylor, because this is like one that is pretty interesting and doesn't feel like something from the last couple of years. It feels like more like years ago when we had like real holdouts. Where are you guys at on this Jonathan Taylor situation?
Well, I was going to say first, like, writ large, with you talking about the way the manager pool reacts to this stuff is, like, I think one like weird side effect of like the manager pool getting much sharper, because the drafting pool is just really, really sharp now. There are, of course, still fish and still people who don't really know what they're doing, but like drafters have never been smarter. But it leads to this weird like side effect of there's so little information edge now. Everyone has amazing information. Everyone has up to date information. So like it does create like a situation where you feel like, well, the only way to get an edge is if you got to react hard. Like you got to go all in or all out. Got to react as hard as possible. So in some ways, like the player pool getting sharper, I feel like is leading to like more reckless behavior. Because like you said, a lot of this stuff is like, yeah, whatever. I mean, 2 weeks from now, no one will remember this happened. But it leads to like huge ADP swings. And Kyler Denny, I mean, I don't even know what to think about Jonathan. The Jonathan Taylor thing, as Kerrane laid out, is different, is very weird. And there is an information vacuum there too, like where we don't have great information there. Like, is his back
literally
injured?
At some point we have to have misinformation, right? Someone has to be lying, because Taylor says, I absolutely do not have a back injury. I've never heard of this. And the team obviously puts him on like NFI or PUP or whatever with the back injury. So not only do we have
Colts are lying. The Colts are lying, right?
Probably the Colts are lying.
I think so.
Because they can just like absolutely screw him if they were just like not, they were to keep him but not play him because he's on, either PUP, injured reserve, NFI. Like any way they can get him out of the year of accrued service and not pay him would be morally ambiguous to say the least.
What's the end game there, right? What's the end game? You put a guy on NFI so he can't play for you. He doesn't accrue a year of service, but you also don't get anything out of that. He comes in next year. He hates your guts. Is it just to keep him healthy to try to trade him? Like, what's the end game?
I think it's just really old-fashioned hardball. The kind of hardball you don't see much anymore because even the teams have become much more reluctant to play hardball in the era of like social media and mass media, where like the fan blowback is so immediate and the fans are just so well informed. Now every fan knows like, hey, what? Like a lot of fans didn't know what the NFI list was and like what that meant, the ramification, but they do now, and like. It's so much harder to like manage like public backlash and expectations now. The teams don't really play this kind of hardball, and even the Colts aren't really playing it. I think they're just saying to Jonathan Taylor, like, man, you're upset now. Like, wait if we put you on the NFI list and you don't get to collect some checks. And I think that's
absolutely how I took it. Yeah, they're at least posturing as if they're willing to cut their nose to spite their face to get Jonathan Taylor to play for them. And like, would it be dumb? Yes, but like it's leverage. It will cost Jonathan Taylor a lot more to not be playing and to like end up being a restricted free agent next year than it will cost this team, because it's not like they have like Super Bowl aspirations right now, right? They're at the bottom of a rebuild essentially.
Got off.
Like, it's embarrassing though, isn't it? I mean,
it is.
Jim Irsay just hired Jeff Saturday because he enjoyed hanging out with him.
Worried? Dude, check out Jim Irsay's Twitter. You think he's worried about embarrassment? No, dude, he's not worried about that.
I mean, Taylor, either he has two choices. He plays for the Colts or his career's over.
Absolutely. That's the way the Colts can play this. Like they legitimately have that power over him.
Is this similar to Carson Palmer at all? Does that remember?
Oh, no, that one was maybe the last like true, like hammer and tongs, like true, like both sides were going to do whatever it took to win that dispute. And it's not similar because I think that was clear from the get-go. Like Carson Palmer like announced like I'm not playing for this team. Like he just straight up said like I'm not playing for the Raiders. Like do whatever you want, but I'm not playing for the Raiders. I'm going to sit
for the Bengals, right?
Well, was that the Bengals or was it the Raiders one? Either way, I guess it was the Bengals one.
It's the Bengals one.
Yeah, it was the Bengals.
I was
one,
9 years old
where he got traded to the Raiders. Hugh Jackson, I think, surrendered 3 first-round picks.
That's what it was. Yeah,
that's correct. It's not similar to that one because I don't think Jonathan Taylor's just been like, we should improve my contract situation somewhat.
Well, that's what he went into the meeting with Irsay. He came out of the meeting with Irsay saying, "I would like to be traded." It doesn't seem it was like.
Hey, by the way, you know that Jim Irsay's bus smells crazy, right? I mean, that bus has got to have like 5 to 8 just of the weirdest smells.
Yeah. Can you give us what's one scent that definitely smells like?
I mean,
well, so Denny, I think, is referencing perhaps marijuana, but another scent could be. I mean, Jim Irsay, he's famous for wrecking McDaniel's family bathroom. It's one of the things he's famous for. Is just absolutely wrecking Josh McDaniels' bathroom. And it's why
I remember this story.
Well, it's a true story. It's why Josh McDaniels didn't take the Colts job because Jim Irsay wrecked his bathroom.
Yeah, they were doing like totally just a sit down meeting to talk about like what it would be like to hire him or whatever, right? And he goes to the bathroom, just annihilates his bathroom.
He just destroyed his bathroom. Like, I mean, we're gonna date ourselves. It was like Jeff Daniels in Dumb and Dumber. He just destroyed the bathroom. The bathroom was inoperable.
There's two sides
after Jim Irsay used it.
Oh man!
So God only knows. I mean, a bus bathroom. I mean, there's much less margin for error there.
I'm just telling you that Jonathan Taylor came out of there and he said, "That's the worst smell I've ever smelled."
Gotta get out of this town, man.
I gotta get out of this team, man. I can't play for this guy. They gotta let him. He should not be meeting with any more players or coaches.
No. Now, horrible management by the Colts. You should never allow a player one-on-one with Jim Irsay.
No.
One of you referenced his tweets. A lot of his old tweets were resurfacing over the weekend. And one of the deeper cuts was that he thought Joe Biden was 6'7".
I haven't seen that one.
I just did a Jim Irsay tweet from like 2011 saying Joe Biden was 6'7". Wow.
He's like, I think he's like 5'8".
No, he's like 6 even.
I think
he's like 6 even. He's probably shrunk with you.
Yeah.
So we've really gone off the rails here, but I do think with the Taylor stuff, I ultimately feel like you do, Denny, that he's playing for the call. They're not trading him. No one's trading anything for a running back that you then have to pay at this point, right? I mean, if he was available, he would get signed to probably like a pretty good deal for a running back, but to give up a third round pick or whatever the Colts would want and then pay him, it just doesn't. It's not going to happen.
I think the Taylor one is one I would almost react to because this situation has gone totally haywire. And like before, no one was making the positive case for Jonathan Taylor. So like, man, like Jonathan Taylor was, you guys remember he was the #1 overall player last year.
I had a ton of them.
And I was like, we probably are getting way too bearish on Jonathan Taylor, but it's now like the sides hating each other, the health like being a true question mark. Totally remaking the offense, a rookie quarterback who might not even be able to like throw. Like it is to the point where this was kind of like a final straw type situation for me with Jonathan Taylor, where the upside case is still like really legit, but a situation where there were like already genuine red flags, this red flag kind of like put it over the top for me. Like I'm just not going to deal with this situation.
See,
he is falling in drafts. So
I think the thing is, he's not going to not play because it serves him no good to not play. It's what Denny was talking about.
He's not, but just things are just so weird. Like the bad vibe seasons almost never go well.
Sure, I have been every once in a while. I admit just going with the vibes, like Aiyuk, Kadarius Toney, and Jameson Williams. Like, these guys don't vibe well. Not gonna go. I don't as much get that from Taylor though, because he's like so proven to be good, and that this tiff with his team, if it really spirals out of control, results in him getting traded. I don't think it results in him not playing because that's the worst outcome for Taylor, essentially, is not playing because he's not a player who reaches free agency if he holds out. Like, it's bad for Saquon and Josh Jacobs to have held out. Obviously, like Saquon's already resolved, but like it's bad for them to hold out. But there's like a light at the end of the tunnel that they can just walk into free agency next year. Taylor doesn't have that option. I think if he holds out the entire year, he becomes a restricted free agent, which gives the team it's exclusive rights essentially for the team.
Yeah.
That's basically how it would work. So I think the quote like worst case scenario is he leaves what is like a pretty mid to not great situation for him, just offensively. Their line is fine.
Yeah, but what is that? I have such a hard time seeing that happen. Like,
yeah, I think that's like the tail end outcome is leaving and playing for another team, which is fine. That might be better. And the vast majority of the distribution is he just plays for the Colts. Like that's almost just certain it's going to happen.
Would you guys trade a second-round pick for Jonathan Taylor? I honestly would. I think there are certain teams that should.
Yeah. Oh, I thought you meant a dynasty or something.
No, sorry. I mean in real life.
Not in real life, I would not.
No. Nope.
I think so obviously I'm team running back, doesn't matter, but like the average second-round pick is like a spectacular flop, whatever the position is. And if you've got a guy at a position where very few guys are actually above replacement level, Jonathan Taylor actually is above replacement level. And I think there are a few teams that should trade a second-round pick for Jonathan.
It's the contract for me. I think the fact that you immediately have to make him probably the second highest paid running back, if not like the highest.
You could just franchise tag him, give him $10 million. I mean, who cares?
I mean, you don't trade for Jonathan Taylor and be like, "In the next 3 years are going to be hell for you, buddy."
That's true.
That's not.
I mean, no one's going to make a commitment to him. So I think he would be like.
Well, there is one team that might do it: the Philadelphia Football Eagles. I think are the one team that might do it. Yeah. Howie goes against type all the time. Howie Roseman would trade a second
Penny on like $800K a year.
I think
Rashad Penny. Yeah, we're gonna be 30 amazing touches from Rashad Penny.
Yeah, they're gonna be awesome.
But touches. I think it would go against everything they've showed us this offseason, which they're going to Goodwill to get their running backs. They're
right.
Like they went to the offseason with Kenneth Gainwell as their guy because they weren't going to re-sign Miles Sanders. Then the Lions hate DeAndre Swift. We'll pick him up for third round.
That was the plan, but I think it could quickly be the watches Rashad Penny and DeAndre Swift once. And like, all right, whatever. We need a better plan.
No, the thing is, they're really good.
Penny's going to look good until he gets hurt.
Yeah,
Penny's going to look awesome.
Yeah.
DeAndre Swift's also going to look awesome until.
It's like when people were talking about the Chiefs getting DeAndre Hopkins. Oh, you mean they do the opposite of what they've shown us for the past 2 years? Like, probably not. Maybe at the right price, sure. If the Colts situation is so untenable and they're just willing to give him up for like a conditional pick, sure, the Eagles would jump in then, and they'd probably pay the contract. But it would go against everything their front office has shown us in the past like 16 months or whatever. So I'd say no, not at all.
So the Taylor situation feels a bit different, but we are getting a discount on him. He's going in the like 2-3 turn. There was some third rounds Taylor. I saw some mid third round Taylor. With these types of situations, like, do you think drafters should be grabbing the discount? I mean, Denny, you seem to think he's either playing for the Colts or not at all. I think we all feel like the not at all part's pretty low. So
yeah,
I guess drafting through it.
I guess you do. Yeah. I mean, if I saw him in the third round, I wouldn't be totally opposed to taking him. But then again, you know, if he really is serious and if his agent is serious about this, then you're just blowing a hole in your roster by taking him in the third round. So I hesitate to say, oh, yes, you got to get him because he's definitely going to play. I do think that some of these running backs do mean business. And by business, I mean trying to get something out of the situation. They have no leverage. I think Josh Jacobs means business. I think I'm afraid to draft Josh Jacobs, for instance.
But Jacobs, that one feels pretty normal to me. I think Jacobs is going to skip training camp, show up, sign the franchise tag, and get going. I actually don't have any issues with drafting Josh Jacobs at the end of the third round, and I've been doing it a lot, actually. I think my hope there, but I'd love your thoughts on this, is Saquon Barkley he paved the way there. That you let Josh Jacobs skip training camp, you give him a couple extra million, in incentives or whatever for this year. You make this year's deal a little sweeter than the franchise tag, and he plays.
I could see the Jacobs thing going kind of the old-fashioned way where he reports at the very end of camp and like needs time to ramp up and maybe misses week 1 just because they don't want to throw him out there, which one game of a 13-game fantasy regular season is like kind of a big deal. And we know anecdotally, I can't remember what the empirical studies say about the holdout players, but it seems like they don't ever have good seasons, like ever, especially for like really bad teams like the Raiders. I could see Josh Jacobs missing a game because I think it's clear he's reporting like Labor Day or something, like he's not going to show up like August like 18th or something. Yeah. He's coming in as late as possible.
But one of the things we're trying to do in best ball is we're trying to get closing line value. So, it's like you kind of wade into this Jacobs uncertainty here because I think you guys agree if Jacobs signs, right, if he does that, he's going to be very expensive the rest of the way. Like, it could be a mid-second round pick or something with, maybe not quite that high, but he is someone that kind of late August drafters, the more casual drafters, have tended to like. And now there's no contract uncertainty. I could see a giant spike in price.
Yeah, I think we all agree it's going to be the plays hardball, and then they give him the Saquon like.
I don't think they're even giving him the Saquon. They're poor, and they probably would have done it already if they were going to. Yeah. I think he's just signing the tag. The Saquon thing is really weird. I didn't even think that was allowed. They rescinded the tag. I mean, that was a strange situation. I don't know why more teams don't do that because like the franchise tag becomes so toxic because you can't do the long-term talks after mid-July, but then you can just rescind the tag and do a normal deal. I was confused.
Just for that year, though?
I guess it's just for that year.
Yeah. It was only for the year. They couldn't have like rescinded it and then like, let's go back to long-term talks.
I couldn't remember that wrinkle.
Yeah, but I think we all agree that whatever the outcome is for Jacobs, it is so clear that he's just going to show up and play at some point. I don't even think he's likely to miss week 1, but at the prices you're getting right now, honestly, not that big of a deal if you play your roster right if you miss week 1.
You're Mr. Best Ball. You're Mr. 2 million best ball guy. Seems like maybe a market inefficiency if the yards from scrimmage leader is going as the 31st overall player going at the end of the third round. It does seem like a bit bearish to me, even with the holdout. Am I incorrect?
I mean, that's how I've been playing it. I'm not someone who's ever really been in on Josh Jacobs as a player. Last year, he really surprised me with how efficient he was, in addition to handling a huge workload. But he wasn't just a volume play. He was actually pretty darn good last year. So I'm, I was like, all right, I was wrong. Like he's more talented than I thought. I also was looking at some of his metrics from previous seasons, and he was always pretty reliable. His success rate was always high. So I was always probably a little too harsh on him to begin with. So yeah, I mean, is a late third rounder. I think he's a target.
I think even as an early third rounder, he should be a target.
I was taking him in the early to mid third round before this holdout stuff really accelerated. But I was underweight. I was just mixing him in. Now I'm like trying to get him. But again, it's kind of this closing line value type of point that I think it's important to try to get as good a prices on these guys as you can in an overall portfolio, even if you are taking on risk with guys like Taylor and Jacobs.
What do you think Labor Day weekend his ADP is going to be, Josh Jacobs? Is it as low as it's going to go right now, basically?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, I think it'd be like in the mid to late second round.
Yep.
Yeah. Seems
one thing you don't have to worry about with Jacobs is potential signings. So this is another topic where I want to there's a few different incumbent running backs that I think we should, we're all kind of on our toes with. Ramondre Stevenson, who is someone that I'm actually getting pretty nervous about because it's like, who haven't they talked to at this point?
I know.
Or talked up. I mean, they're talking up Ty Montgomery, who I don't even think is practicing right now, but
Kerrane, not to interrupt, they're talking up Ty Montgomery so much, they're having former Patriots employees talk him up to the media.
Well, yeah, that was the one report.
They had their old running backs coach like Ty Montgomery, this hell of a man.
Yeah, I think it was the running back coach from last year. He's not the running back coach anymore.
Ivan Fears.
And
that's the one that really got everyone jazzed about it. But I didn't think it was as serious as everyone seemed to take it.
I'm so tired. I'm so tired of pretending like Ty Montgomery is going to be something. I'm tired.
Well, he's not, but I mean, it's not great for Ramondre that they're like, oh, Ty Montgomery, he's so good.
Yeah, Kerrane is right. Where it's pretty bad if they're dispatching. Like Bill Belichick is getting on the phone. It's like, no, you give the quote. I don't think you understand. No, you give the quote. You talk to Mike Reese. You give the quote.
We've been doing this
That's Ty Montgomery.
We've been doing this for 5 years.
I'm retired, man. You said that we were done with this.
I'm done.
Denny, have you seen the play? No, Denny. I want to remind you of the play where there's a kickoff that's nearly out of bounds, and I believe it's Ty Montgomery who puts his feet out of bounds and then lays down to touch the football because then that's a kickoff out of bounds. And the Patriots, honestly, now that I say that, it does make sense. The Patriots love that stuff.
They love that. That borderline cheating shit. Man, they love it.
What do you mean borderline?
Also the cheating shit.
They love all of it, to be fair. Zeke, met with them. They were trying to get Dalvin Cook to come up to New England. He just was like, no, New York's as far north as I'm going. So yeah, I mean, I haven't talked to Kareem Hunt yet, but that could be in the cards soon. Like that type of stuff makes me nervous. You got the Breece Hall. We're constantly his ADP's yo-yoing every time Dalvin Cook mentions the Jets. He drops by
Breece's ADP never made any sense, man.
I love him.
He's good, but wasn't he going in the first round?
No. The earliest he ever was going was the early to mid second because I was selecting him there. No one else was doing that.
That's categorically insane.
It makes me very nervous.
No, it's not. It is categorically insane.
Why is it so insane? So this goes to some of the injury stuff.
He's played 7 career games and he's not healthy right now. It's categorically insane. I mean, and especially it's Aaron Rodgers coming in and Aaron Rodgers points to the fourth running back. I like this guy. And the coach,
but he hasn't done that. I don't get this.
No, he's going to though. He's going to. And Aaron Rodgers isn't wasting time babying along injured players this year. This is his last rodeo. He doesn't give a single shit about Breece.
Aaron Rodgers isn't wasting his time cuddling along.
That's all he does. That's all. Randall Cobb should have been retired. Randall Cobb should have been retired 4 years ago.
But as far as I know, he's not.
He got Allen Lazard a contract. I mean, he's pretty into that actually.
But I just think it's insane because how limited the resume is, and that it seems like a J.K. Dobbins where he's just not hell. It's not as bad as Javonte Williams, but and two, it's really bad. It became immediately apparent the Jets were lying about the injury timeline. Camp starts he's not healthy after all. Whoops. Like we
But
were.
he's running 23 miles an hour.
I know. Yeah, he is
by the
running
way.
very fast.
I mean, that's about as fast as a human can run. So that seems
It
pretty
is.
good to me.
Seems
You guys
like
aren't into that?
maybe the watch was a little hot on that one.
You aren't into him like breaking the speed limit in school zones. That's not fun for you.
No, I mean, I'm actually, and this is probably oversimplified, but I'm trying to just be really simple with these injured running backs and just say no, I'm not taking them. Like I'm not taking Javonte Williams.
Not a value hound, I see.
I'm not taking Breece Hall. And it makes me nervous that Kerrane and Sean Siegel and other sharp guys are like, no, you gotta be in on Hall. And I'm like, no, I don't.
It's interesting that I was touting Hall in the last show Denny and I were on together, and then he mentioned the sharp guys like Kerrane, Sean Siegel, and he didn't mention me as someone who just told him about
also you.
Look, I mean, I think the thing with Hall for me is that he was a very, very good prospect. I thought an underrated prospect. So then when he flashed elite efficiency as both a receiver and a rusher, I was like, okay, he was underrated. He's an elite athlete. He's super young. That's one of the things I liked about him, but I think it's relevant for the injury, as noted by some of the injury doctors. Like Edwin Porras has mentioned that as a really important part of trying to figure out his recovery timeline. He's been bullish on his recovery as well as some other guys on Twitter, which I find encouraging since I don't know anything about medicine or the human body. But Breece Hall, like, I think you do have to assume that he will start slow, especially if they were to make a signing like Dalvin Cook. The thing for me is that all the money in these tournaments is in the final weeks. So if I'm getting Breece Hall from last year in the third round and he's at full speed in weeks 15, 16, 17, and does he have a 55% snap share? I would prefer 65. I prefer 70, but he's so explosive that I think, I can probably even survive that if he is at 65% of the snaps for the last, 4 weeks of the season or whatever, 5 weeks of the season. I think I'm making a lot of money with one of those Breece Hall teams is just the way I think through it.
Kerrane, I have a question for you because I do think like at some point, like you can only say the final weeks of the season matter so long. So I'm guessing like I'm trying to figure out what would be that point. How late into the season where he's like, let's say he's truly committee back, just 50-50 splitting, not getting a ton of targets, like that type of player with Dalvin Cook. How late into the season does that switch have to flip before it's a negative, like a bad bet? Because I'm taking a ton of Breece Hall right now because I thought he looked elite as a rookie, and he was on pace to easily be the offensive rookie of the year. He was a great prospect. I think his recovery shouldn't be too bad. But how late into the season to where he's like giving you like RB3 numbers, is it probably like a dead bet?
Well, I think you want to think through him a little bit like a rookie almost. Like you're betting on him almost like he's a rookie running back where you're not going to get that immediate star production the first year or the first few weeks of the season, but you're betting on him to come on down the stretch. The nice thing about him compared to a rookie is that with those rookies, we don't actually even know if they're good or not. But with him, we know that he is good, provided that he's able to make a full recovery down the stretch. But that is the bet. But we know the talent exists there. I think I pulled up DeAndre Swift. DeAndre Swift had some early season production, but he didn't really do a ton until week 8 because he actually was hurt and then came back week 8. He kind of chugged along, and then he really came on down the stretch. Week 13, week 15, and week 17 had really strong games. I just think you'd be fine with that. Like if it was from like week 8 on, if you started putting up some production, but you want to build with Breece Hall in a way that reflects that. So I take Samaje Perine more often when I have a Breece Hall team. I'm more interested in a Jamal Williams if I have a Breece Hall team. I'm trying to play it like this guy's not going to crush for me early in the season. He's similar to Jahmyr Gibbs as a selection. I was going to say
he's like a barbell version of Jahmyr Gibbs, where like Gibbs is probably active week 1, barring a catastrophic thing happening right now. I don't know if Breece is active week 1, but I think Breece is. I think there's a really clear path to where he is dominating his backfield in week 14, 15, 16, and he's super efficient and he's on a good offense. Whereas I don't know if Gibbs, even as a rookie at any point, dominates his backfield. I think he can be efficient, get a lot of high value touches, but I don't know if he has that peak of being the RB1 overall in weeks 15, 16, 17. So it's more of like an extreme version of Jahmyr Gibbs. That's what I was thinking of when you said treat him like a rookie.
Kerrane, hearing your spiel on Breece Hall, like not saying this like as a joke or a bit, like is like what separates you as like a fantasy player from us, because to me, I'm like only focusing on like the early season negatives, which make to me are. I just feel like the Jets keep moving the goalposts on the injury. Having Dalvin Cook like observe an entire practice, like,
it's not great.
Not good. That's probably not great.
That's not great.
Talking up Izzy Abanikanda, blah blah blah. There's a lot
that
of
is great because kids keep Dalvin Cook away.
That's true.
Yeah.
A lot of negative signals, but you're right. In the game you're playing, it doesn't even really matter. Like it does seem like you. Basically, I was like, yeah, we should probably buy the dip on Breece Hall when you were talking, because like, yeah, the early season stuff will survive that, especially you cover yourself with some like touch hounds, like some
and I think in the game, the more traditional fantasy football game as well, managed leagues and home leagues and everything, I still think he's quite a good pick in the third round because the playoffs are where the money is in those leagues too, and you're gonna know whether or not you should be starting Breece Hall. I think you're gonna know. Now, maybe the first week that he has a good game, you might not have him in your lineup. But after that, you're lock buttoning him into your lineup, and I think you feel pretty good about him.
I would like to take a moment to say I am now in on Breece Hall. Thank you.
Right.
Now we're only drafting injured running backs after going on Kerrane's show.
Well, okay, so this is an interesting thing related to the Breece Hall side. We talked Dalvin Cook. Dalvin Cook, to me, is the only guy priced of the veteran free agent running backs like he is going to play for a team this year, right? Like he's not that expensive. I actually started mixing him in a little bit, even though I don't think he's a particularly good pick because he looked pretty washed last year in the advanced stuff. The other guys, Leonard Fournette, Ezekiel Elliott, and Kareem Hunt are essentially free in drafts. We are coming off a season where I drafted Gronkowski early in the offseason, thinking he was definitely going to play because Brady was playing. That didn't work out.
Well, we got Julio, though, and we got a ton of closing line value on Julio, too.
Well, yeah, true. And I drafted a ton of Will Fuller, who
big same.
Yeah.
Anybody heard from that guy?
No, nope. I don't even know that he announced his retirement.
No, he did. He's literally just vanished after a hand injury.
Apparently his finger was shattered, and that seems rough.
Was not good.
But these guys are being priced like we're not even sure if they're going to play football this year. And then I'm pretty sure, like Kyle, these guys are all going to rise significantly in ADP when they do sign, right?
Yeah, we've seen that. I thought DeAndre Hopkins landed in a horrible spot. Like I think of all the people, anything that was floated out, even though I thought like Chiefs and Bills were unlikely, and I thought Patriots at some point looked rather likely, frankly. Landing with the Titans, I thought, was about as bad as it could get. And you would think rationally, if you're pricing DeAndre Hopkins, you price it as like here would be his projection if he goes to the Chiefs. And what is his odds of going to those Chiefs? And then you just do that for every team that we think he could realistically land on. And you get almost like an expected value of projection. And he went to the worst one. He should have fallen in a completely rational market. And instead, he rose. So to me, that is, and we've seen this in the past too, but that's a perfect example right now of just any form of action. When like the players who are going on the pup list right now that we expect, they go down anyways. We should have known that. We should have had a very high likelihood of Breece, Pacheco going on the pup list. Didn't matter. They fell. Didn't matter. DeAndre Hopkins rose. So from a closing line value standpoint, very obvious that I think any signing at any point before week one, while drafts are still going on, these guys rise. And we do know that like closing line value impacts the expected value of your team. And two, like I think a lot of these guys have potential to land in spots like Leonard Fournette visited the Patriots. He could be a high value touch guy. Like I don't think he's great, but the Patriots have been so clear with their actions that they don't want Ramondre to be the guy he was last year. I still think they like him, but to what degree it's unclear. And if you're bringing in Lenny, like you're not bringing him in anything other than like short yardage work and good pass catching work, Zeke pass blocking work or whatever, like stuff like that. Short yardage work. You're not bringing him in for a 1st and 10 carry on the 50. Don't do that. A 1st and 10 carry or a 1st and 1 carry on the 1, reasonable to at least put him in there. So to me, like Lenny and Zeke especially, has Kareem Hunt visited a single team? He looks like the candidate to be the Will Fuller of this cohort.
Yeah, what do you guys think about that? Like, is he at risk of like not like it? I don't like that we're not hearing anything about him.
Yeah,
he's like Will Fuller this year.
Yeah, I think it's a real chance that he doesn't sign with anybody. Like the running back market is so depressed for even the stars that I mean nobody's going to offer a guy like Kareem Hunt anything. after Kareem Hunt was horrendous last year in Cleveland, like by every measure.
I think what's going on with Kareem Hunt is we see it in the stats and the advanced stats. I think his like film must just be like hellaciously bad because there was like kind of some takes like that. And some of the articles are like it's scouts just being like he wasn't good last year, and like they weren't even like citing stats. I think they just like saw his film like he was awful, and he was just like Will Fullering really hard. I totally agree. I don't understand like Fournette and Zeke like essentially not having ADPs like Kerrane said, or it's almost again like an unfortunate byproduct of the player pool becoming sharper and sharper is that like no one wants to be the guy who drafts like Fournette or Elliott. And like I've been taking them like when I've been, which is frequently coming away with like only like one or two like kind of like touch heavy running backs. Like I've just been at the end of drafts like getting Zeke and Fournette so much. And I have to cut them. Like who cares? But like they've been essentially free even in like normie like home league type of drafts. Just like no one wants anything to do with them. And like you guys said, they get signed. It's going to be to touch the ball. Like they're going to have like roles. Yeah. They're going to have high value roles, basically smaller roles than we're used to. Like Leonard Fournette's going to catch passes, maybe score touchdowns. Zeke is going to score touchdowns, and their ADPs don't make any sense.
Yeah, it's kind of drafting scared a little bit. Like you don't want to be a guy who takes the dumb boomer pick, but like these guys would have been bad picks where they like might have gone like. These are the guys, you're drafting. I guess drafting off a draft magazine wouldn't have Zeke rated very highly, but it's sort of like the thing of like, oh, you fool, didn't you know, and you didn't, and it's like, but we actually do want to be willing to take on some risk as long as it's calculated risk because we are trying to beat everybody else, And to me, I'm like Zeke and Fournette strike me as targets. Right? I mean, Zeke's a little more expensive, so I've gotten less of him, but I have been working to try to get him on my roster some as well because I think his price is going to rise. At least I'm going to get the cheapest version of Zeke.
I find it hard. Pat talked about taking these guys late when he's a little hard up on running back, and I'm always hard up on running back. I'm always like dying for touches late in drafts. I do think they make sense, but I also I struggle to take guys like that over, I don't know, like a Dwayne McBride in Minnesota or Jerome Ford or Kenny Gainwell.
Jerry Ford,
Gus Edwards, things of that nature, guys of that nature. So I don't know. I see what you're saying, but I'd rather like take those guys over a Zeke or a Leonard Fournette. I mean, come on, man. Zeke, for real? We're taking Zeke?
I think the thing is with
best ball, man. He just needs to score a touchdown a couple times.
God. I think let me say,
my Zeke take is best ball. My Zeke take and Fournette takes are best ball only. I would not be taking them in managed leagues. Like you're not going to you're never putting them in your lineup.
Never.
Yeah. I mean, don't say no. You got to remember,
Zeke goes back to the Cowboys, dude.
I don't know, man. By late September, all three of my first three picks are now on injured reserve and out 6 to 8 weeks. And
I mean, Latavius Murray was banking points with the Broncos last year.
Like Zeke, it's like, I know it's the Cardinals, but he's the lead back now that James Conner's out, and he's going to get some tutties. And that's all that matters, folks. Was that way too grim?
No, that's the perfect level of grim because I think it's unfortunately accurate. It's and I think with these guys with like the Zekes and the Fournettes, they probably just have tighter like distributions, right? Like I don't think there's any way where Zeke without injuries like steps into a spot and usurps someone as like to top into a 1B role unless he joins a terrible backfield. And like you could convince me that Dwayne McBride is really good as a rookie and he starts taking carries out of Alexander Madison's workload, like a significant amount. On the other hand, you could really convince me that he's a healthy scratch for 17 weeks. It is absolutely possible. Where the moment, and we think this moment is rather likely, that Zeke or Fournette signs, they're pretty likely to be active and getting touches every week. So maybe this is a thing where if you really can't stomach taking Zeke or Fournette, it comes down to what your roster construction looks like. Like if you think you need just like basic bread and butter points, like take a Leonard Fournette or a Zeke. But if you load it up on running back and you're like, I just need to win the flex 2 more times. Dwayne McBride, like I love Dwayne McBride, so he could be that guy for me. But the same for Jerome Ford or even Kenneth Gainwell.
Well, let's talk the Dwayne McBride side of this because there's like I think 2 things happening as we look at like ambiguous depth charts behind a starter. Like when we're trying to figure out the running back 2 through 3 or 4, and we're not really sure where guys sit. There's kind of the Dwayne McBride side where it's like he's an explosive rusher. He's, I've seen some stuff where he's like, oh, he made a play, Kendre Miller is the more expensive version of this, where it's like he's making a lot of plays. He's becoming exciting, but and there's some early season. You can talk yourself into an early season run, assuming Kamara gets suspended, which I think he will. And then maybe down the stretch, you can tell yourself this little story because he's looking so good. But then you also have the more boring side of this, which is that like Keontae Ingram appears to be the clear-cut number 2 in the Cardinals depth chart. And that's like information that is probably more important, right? To get just like he's the locked-in number 2, or like Zamir White is running as the clear number 1 right now with Josh Jacobs not at camp. Like that information is probably a lot more important than Kendre Miller looking really good, right? Am I right about that, or do you guys disagree?
No, I think you're right about that. And I think as much as like I want to be a Dwayne McBride stan, like we see this with Samaje Perine, like do I think Chris Evans' like ceiling and utility to a team was better last year, or more intriguing at least for the Bengals than it is to trot out Samaje Perine? Yeah, like I want to see what Chris Evans has got. It doesn't matter though. Like, and frankly, the like average, the good, like the 75th percentile outcome for a guy like Chris Evans, who doesn't have much draft capital backing him, wasn't any sort of like elite prospect, is that he is like serviceable. Whereas we at least knew that about Samaje Perine. And when teams are like clearly signaling that, I think that is much more valuable than like no contact practices, long runs. So yeah, I think you're right. And I think it's like an unfortunate capitulation for someone who like, I'm really convinced Dwayne McBride's a better talent than Ty Chandler or whatever. Like we should be more confident in teams making clear signals than beat writers telling us about a long run.
Yeah, that's very, very smart.
Well said.
Yeah.
Well said, Kyle.
Which Johnny Venerable told us yesterday, Keontae Ingram is the clear-cut RB2 in Arizona. Because, man, you look at their running back depth chart, it is barren. It is really – it is apocalyptic.
Well, that applies to the rest of their depth chart as well.
That's true.
So
and really their town also.
Kerrane, you'll love this, by the way. Our Cardinals reporter yesterday told us
sending shockwaves this report
that the team loves Greg Dortch. Loves him.
I heard that he was I listened to that episode and I was struck by you guys should submit that podcast for a podcast award in the category of comedy.
Yeah,
I don't think I've ever heard Pat laugh so many times.
I was laughing
in the podcast. Yeah. It was unbelievable, and the laughs were being generated from just factual information about what the Cardinals are going to look like this year.
Please tell me one of the facts is Colt McCoy is practicing but not throwing football. So
it was Johnny who blew the lid off.
Share that anecdote of Colt McCoy. Pat.
Well, it was Johnny who blew the lid. I've seen it kind of circulating on Twitter. People missed it over the weekend. Where the Cardinals are doing reps where they do like a normal snap and run a play, but instead of throwing the ball, Colt McCoy just points to where he would have thrown the ball. and this is like flown under the radar over the weekend. And now I've seen it on Twitter. Now there's footage of it where he literally just points. I'm like, man, I've seen better uses of a team's resource than having a 36-year-old quarterback pointing.
Can you imagine being a receiver in that situation? Be like,
dude, if I'm a receiver, I'm fake celebrating every one of these. I am like, I'm taking another football and doing the Jimmy Graham dunk. I'm like, oh, yes, my third touchdown this practice.
It's crazy, guys. It's going to be so bad. Also, there, Johnny told us that Kyler Murray is going to be under center primarily for the first time in his life. This is going to be a debacle.
It is going to be a debacle.
So like, how much, like, okay, it sounds like you guys are kind of buying into, because that's one of the things, right? We're trying to get a sense of like how good these teams are going to be. Yeah. Like apparently another example of this would be the Buccaneers this year. Like apparently Baker Mayfield is like throwing interceptions constantly and still looks way better than Kyle Trask. So that's like another concern. Like the team, because we've done this before and gotten it wrong, right? The Seahawks were supposed to be our dumpster fire team last year, and they just weren't. So there's like kind of this And I think there's a natural sort of pile-on effect. I also think there's like a natural bias to want to just like X out stuff. I certainly, it feels good to just be like, don't have to draft him, don't have to think about that anymore.
Yeah.
And at the same time, listening to that interview, Kyler Murray, immobile coming off an ACL tear, under center for the first time, like in his entire, like in his college career.
I think he said 15 years, so maybe some peewee he had. Done.
So that seems really bad and kind of confusing.
Seem good.
But Kerrane, you made an amazing point, and I'm not a victory lapper, but I spent all last summer saying with the Seahawks, and I'm a big time Geno Smith truther, like maybe still like negative truther, but all last summer with DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett, I kept making the point, like it is still an NFL offense. They are still NFL players. There is going to be a target share. They are going to dominate it, and like they're not just like falling off the face of the fantasy earth, basically. Probably important to keep that in mind with Mike Evans and Chris Godwin. Like you're saying, the Cardinals, though, man, I don't know. Like,
but not with the Cardinals.
Is Marquise Brown ever even been good? Like, that's like a big problem.
The difference is that, like last year at the Seahawks, DK, Tyler Lockett, and they had really made a lot of investments in their offensive line. Like, they had a good tight end core, like really good running back room. Everything was like, how can we support, maybe hide this quarterback? Whereas, like, the Cardinals, what are the James Conner's going to carry the workload until they get Kyler Murray up to speed. Like, no, he's not, dude. Like, he's going to have Michael Wilson covered within an inch of his life for every snap, and he's going to jump ball it to him. Like, no, that's not going to work. I don't know what their outs are to success. Maybe the out is Kyler Murray comes back quickly and he was a really
there's no success. I mean, they're not going to be successful, but is there any fantasy value here?
I do think so. Johnny mentioned Trey McBride is a guy who would just be targeted relentlessly underneath by two terrible quarterbacks in Clayton Tune and Colt McCoy. And I'm in on that. I mean, I asked, like, is Zach Ertz coming off an ACL? Is he going to be a problem? And Johnny said no.
No, he did say no.
He's like, not at all. So I like, like a K. Dotton type, like running a lot of routes, like doing nothing with the ball after he gets it. But seeing a ton of, like, he has a real path. He's one of the few very late round tight ends who has a real path to targets.
Johnny, by the way, not big on Rondale Moore.
No, but he was big on Michael Wilson.
He was real big on Michael Wilson.
He was expecting Michael Wilson to take over in two wide receiver sets by the end of the year.
He was.
Does that do anything for you? Because Wilson is a dude, by the way, and this is kind of goes into another topic of like the drumbeat narrative stuff of like when you see something, and this became kind of a trope where, Pete Overzet was doing his drumbeat, making fun of the drumbeat concept, but the drumbeat does feel like a legitimate thing we should pay attention to. We saw this last year with Isaiah Pacheco, truly a drumbeat, like every single day. And I know this for a fact because I was rooting hard for Ronald Jones to win that job and he didn't. And it became quite clear, even to me, through my extremely biased goggles, that he was done because Pacheco is every single day. And weirdly enough, Michael Wilson is one of those players right now where in OTAs and minicamp, the Cardinals were saying we got to steal. He's been talked up by Kyler Murray. He's been talked up by the coaches. He's been talked up. Apparently, he has a connection with Clayton Tune, presumably because he will throw the ball instead of just getting pointed at. To see the connection there.
And he points, and again, I made the same joke. He's sacked by 5 people at once.
But like this, how far? Where is the line on drumbeat players, and is Michael Wilson above it?
Drumbeat players. So people always have this tendency to just like, because they've been burned so many times with like false hype in the past, like t-shirts and shorts hype. So t-shirts and shorts hype should maybe be disregarded. The pads are finally coming on this week, but it is a huge mistake to just disregard the positive reports because sometimes it's like, well, what else are they going to say? They're going to say he's bad? And like, no, but like they don't have to say anything. And it's pretty notable. They can't stop saying like this guy is amazing. Kind of like what's happening with Jaxon, Smith-Njigba and Seahawks game.
Oh, that's another great one. Yeah,
they're just getting unprompted, just like loving JSN. And I pay more attention to it too when it's the media and not the coaching staff. And it's like it's been the media a lot with Michael Wilson because the coaching staff, who knows like what game they're playing, like what agenda they're working. They always kind of have an agenda. Like when the media too, which is what happened with Isaiah Pacheco last year, just constantly. Like, Isaiah Pacheco's making the team. He looks amazing. He's going to actually feature early in the year. Like they have agendas too, maybe sometimes, but far less of an agenda. And do not like fall victim to the like just like ignoring like the hype, and because some of it is going to be wrong, of course, but like they don't have to say this stuff, and if they're saying the stuff consistently, especially after the pads come on, it is like still a very real thing. Maybe it won't work out, but like it's not like their imagination. Like it's a very real thing.
Does it factor in like with a guy like Wilson, and this doesn't just apply to Wilson? That's why I want to mention is that like when there's a new regime and a draft pick, a day 2 draft pick of a new regime is getting that to me would be like a little bit. I'd be more willing to buy into it because
maybe not if it's the coaching staff, because then it could be like the agenda. Again, even if it's the coaching staff, they don't have to say this stuff. Like they don't. No one's like making them like lavish praise on Michael Wilson, but that is always a huge. That's basically what Johnny Venerable was saying on our podcast was. They don't like the holdover players. They're really liking their guys. They were skeptical maybe on Trey McBride, but they're really liking him. And so, yeah, Kerrane, that's an excellent – always keep in mind who drafted these guys and, like, whose players they are.
Which is why Rondale Moore is problematic this year.
He is.
Right.
He didn't say anything good about Rondale Moore. He even said Rondale Moore.
Has anyone ever said
He even said Rondale Moore was down on Rondale Moore, basically. They asked him about how he plans to stay healthy. He's just like, man, I don't know. I've done everything right, and I just haven't stayed healthy. Like, he said it was very sad. Yeah.
He should try being taller.
To bring things back to the positive here, we do also have we have some additional kind of breakout hype candidates this year. Dalton Kincaid is, drawing a lot of buzz.
He is.
Sky Moore drawing a lot of buzz. I guess with those two guys in particular, though, I think they strike me as guys that we want to be somewhat cautious on. So I've been buying the Sky Moore ascendancy in ADP, but I think I'm done if he goes into the mid-8th. Like, I think he's now kind of capped because he's hitting sort of a new tier of wide receivers that he's bumping into, and I don't want to be taking him over those. And the reason that I don't really want to be taking him over those guys is that we are still talking about a slot wide receiver, I think. And so you're getting hype, but are you going to get a full-time role in an NFL offense once the season starts? That's my concern with Sky Moore as he moves up. I wish I had thought about this harder last year when I was hyping him to the 4th round. But Dalton Kincaid would be another example of, I'm glad he looks awesome. How much is he going to play? Is he going to play on more than half the routes? Because I kind of think he isn't right now. I could be wrong, but I think Dawson Knox is going to have a really bad season because he's coming out. And are they sort of tipping their plays at that point, depending on which tight end they have out there? So those two were kind of interesting where it's like, we got the hype, but are people going to lose their minds a little bit and forget about, the fact that they're kind of more part-time players in terms of archetype?
With Sky Moore, I feel like the hype is coming a little more from the coaching staff than the media. And it's also coming about where it's like, it's hype coming from like negative reasons. Like he's getting hyped because there's kind of like no one else doing it. Like he's almost like defaulting. That's always
vacuum. It's a classic hype vacuum.
That's always dangerous too with the hype. Like, is this guy just defaulting into hype? It's better when they're going out there and just like take it, which is like Michael Wilson's like kind of just like creating his own hype because no one's going to hype a Cardinal, He's kind of just like creating, and like Dalton Kincaid was kind of set up for people to be like, yeah, I don't know, they overdrafted him, but he's kind of creating his own hype. Sky Moore could be doing well, but it's been more about like who's not there, and I feel like it's been a little more coaching staff driven than media driven.
And Justin Watson was talking him up at one point. I don't know. What are your thoughts on players hyping the guys? Is that good or bad?
Yeah.
Denny?
I don't know. I think you have to like pay attention like how long they've been playing with them and like maybe their motivation on things. I will say that I actually don't have Sky Moore's best ball ADP in front of me right now. Maybe Kerrane.
He's up into
32. He goes with a 32nd overall pick, Denny, if you haven't drafted recently.
No, he's like that. You grab him at the late 8th. If you
he's
have
the wide receiver.
If you have Mahomes, I'm looking at him in the late 8th.
He's the wide receiver 48 on him.
So in normie leagues, it looks like he's going in like the 10th or maybe even the 11th of 12-team leads. So
he's probably going undrafted in some normie.
So leagues. That is like a huge difference. Like, yeah, Pat's right. I mean, there are a lot of home leagues that where you're going to be like, oh, Sky Moore's still on the board. It's the 14th round. I guess I'll just pick him. This sounds like a joke. I swear it's not a bit. But like, talk about the hype. Richie James is getting hype out of the Chiefs camp. And it's been consistent. It hasn't been just one. It's been like I've seen 3 or 4 times where coaches are like, hey, this is
well, Sky Moore was hyping him up.
Right. So
we got a situation here.
Richie James was pretty good last year, per the
It's a hype Ponzi scheme in the Chiefs. Everyone's just hyping each other.
Yes.
It's true, it's bad. No one knows who to hype because they're all bad. So like one day they're like, oh yeah, I mean
no, come on.
It's like a generic Prince.
So the whole
actually is generic Prince.
I know there's a lot of it. Sorry, Denny.
I mean, look at Richie James is not. He's going to be a slot. He's going to be a slot guy. Like they're not going to like bump him to the boundary. Like it's either going to be him or Sky Moore on the field. So it makes me nervous about.
And
Moore
Justin Ross is getting hype.
Yeah, big time. Yeah, but he's more of a boundary guy, right?
Noah Gray is getting hype. I'm not even kidding. Like the Chiefs, there's a vacuum. They tell these people who to hype. They gotta like get their stories straight. Who they're hyping.
Yeah, they really do.
I feel like I'm in the minority of like I'm pretty rarely buying any hype from anyone in camp. I'd say players is the lowest tier of players hyping.
Players by far the lowest tier.
Like
players you kind of say ignore it. Like for all I know, like. They might think he's good because he beats them in Madden all the time.
Yeah.
And like that colors their perception of him on the field.
And they have to like their locker room mates, right? They right next to each other in the locker room, next to each other in like film study. You're not gonna be like, yeah, I think Sky Moore's really sucking in this training camp. And then you're like, hey Sky, how's it going? You ready for film study or whatever? Like, but I generally do think like we're just talking about Noah Gray getting hyped. Like these things are like oftentimes meaningless. I think like it is definitely worth tuning into, and it especially is like
the drumbeat is real. The drumbeat honestly is real. Sometimes it is wrong, but the drumbeat is never.
But then how do we like?
Because it's directionally accurate.
Is it? But like, if it's sometimes wrong, we need to know how often is it wrong versus being right, or else it's meaningless. It's just noise, right?
Oh.
But we don't know how often exactly, but it's
yeah,
right
exactly. That's what I'm
wrong.
saying. So you can't measure it. Why
we have our best people on it?
Best people are looking into it very powerfully.
I think there are probably some things you can definitely glean, or maybe you can more likely glean from camp is like team usage, like team pace, pass rates type of stuff. I think those are more likely to be endemic of things that are being practiced at camp. Even then, I'm not super confident in
another
that.
good signal,
I don't
Kyle.
know about that.
Another good signal. So a lot of these guys were getting hyped. So training camps are going on like 10 days or whatever. The pads weren't on yet. So a lot of the guys who are early. So it's funny on Rotoworld. Sometimes I'll like search a guy and like there was 3 blurbs on this guy from July 24th to July 30th, and then there have been none in the past 17 days, aka when the pads have come on. That's always an interesting signal to me. And even more interesting is when it continues once the pads are on. Like Dalton Kincaid is still lighting up every Bills camp, basically. That is it happens every summer where there'll be someone who has like 3 blurbs. I'm not saying this is bad, but it's because it's what the coaches are saying. So then we blurb it. But then like it mysteriously stops July 30th. Because
that's a good point.
Dalton Kincaid is a guy I'd like to get your thoughts, because this is one where, I mean, I've got Liam Murphy's on Twitter saying, literally tweeting like, fantasy analysts, don't be on the wrong side of history on Dalton Kincaid, which I'm firmly on the wrong side of history. I'm going to be on the wrong side of history. Yeah. And like, I spent an hour on his podcast, like literally, I think an hour arguing about Dalton Kincaid's snap share and how I don't think he can really have a meaningful role unless part of it comes out of Dawson Knox's snaps. But he is a drumbeat player right now, and I'm starting to get a little nervous that maybe he does just eat a lot of Dawson Knox's role and is kind of a full-time enough. Like I still think he probably run like a 65% route rate or 70% maybe at most. But if they look for him a lot in the red zone and he has a really high targets per route run and he's a bit of a deep threat, then I mean he's going to be a pretty nice pick in the Josh Allen offense. Not
to make this too confusing, but Dalton Kincaid is like one of the more complex cases because the Bills need Kincaid to work like so badly, right? Kincaid could be a classic like too cute by half plan for the Bills. So everyone in the Bills, like they need a third target. They missed on all the receivers in the draft. So then it's like, oh, whatever, let's take the tight end who's a receiver. And like they need it to work like so badly. That is like kind of the best hype is like a situation where it's like organic. Like they don't need it. Like the Chiefs didn't need Isaiah Pacheco. I mean, I guess they kind of did. Like when it's organic, what's in a position that wasn't even necessarily a need. Like that is like those are like the strongest type signals to me to pay attention to. Kincaid, it's very interesting, but it's also like a situation the Bills are so invested in making work. Like they need it to work really bad. If it doesn't, it's going to instantly look like one of the worst picks of the 2023 draft.
But are you considering taking him? Because
no, God, no.
Also, to that point though,
it's
it
a
would
trap.
also look like one of the worst tight end extensions, Cole Kmet withstanding, because they extended Dawson Knox last year, I think just before the season. It's like they're also would be invested in making that not look dumb, which too late on that one, but whatever.
I don't know. I cannot get behind a guy who had exactly one good college.
Come on, man.
I'm sorry, he did. This
one
is
good
all
college
everybody-
game.
He had
It
one
was the
good
USC
college
game. He
Denny's been
nuked
beating.
USC.
Speaking
It
of
was
drum
iconic.
beat, Denny's been beating this drum.
and
for
when
quite a
so
while.
I've tweeted that and people get really upset. Oh, that's messed up to say that about Dalton Kincaid. Well, show me the second one. Show me the second good game. I've looked at the box scores. There's not a second one.
Man,
It's just the one.
It does. He does not. He wasn't a great prospect. I mean, I think he was a pretty good tight end prospect. But that's with the first round draft capital.
Oof,
He does.
Dalton
he's not an elite
Kincaid
prospect.
had 3 career 100-yard games, 1 game above 107 yards, and it was for Southern California where he had 16 receptions for 2.
Well,
And
the good news
That's
is
pretty good game.
In the
That's a good game.
rematch, he was shut down, wasn't he? He was, I believe, he was
Was
shut
Denny,
down.
he had let's see here. USC opponent, Southern Cal.
in the meantime, Denny, the good news is that one of his
Pat's
other
got it, I think.
He did, it was less than 2 months later. He had 4 catches for 40 yards. So yeah, they pretty. It's got to make an adjustment on Kincaid.
the good news is though that one of his other 100-yard games came against Southern Utah, who doesn't have a sports reference page, which tells me they're probably an FCS team. And one of his other ones was against Colorado.
Southern Utah
who's
is
not good.
indeed not bolded.
I'm sorry. No, this is a trap. This is like class. I've been playing this game for too long to fall for Dalton Kincaid.
I just
Dalton
picture
Kincaid is right in 12, Denny, on underdog. He's going right behind Greg Dulcich, ahead of Chigakonkwo, Dalton Schultz, Tyler Higbee, Gerald Everett, Cole Kmet, Taysom Hill, Sam Laporta.
I may have said on the podcast last week, 0.0% chance Dalton Kincaid scores more fantasy points than Cole Kmet.
Well, look.
This one I'm actually fine with. You named some guys who I wasn't fine with, and then you got this one. I was like, oh well, you got me there.
Dawson Knox has a real chance to be the highest scoring tight end on the Bills.
Tight end 22, Dawson Knox.
Yeah.
What a weird situation.
Would you guys take Dawson Knox straight up over Dalton Kincaid fantasy points, just like median? Like, are you going to win this bet more often than not? I think I would.
No, I wouldn't.
I would.
They're too invested in it.
You know what? Just because I'm invested in this take, yes, I would take Dawson Knox over.
Wow.
Denny's as invested in this take as the Bills are, and Dalton.
Denny is all in this one. He's been laser focused on this.
He
one
drafted
since,
this take with a first round pick. Yeah, I lean that he's a trap, but I will say I'm a little nervous about just the late season rookie breakout stuff with guy on the Bills who they're super.
I will say, Pat, when you were pitching the upside, you were like, well, what if he gets more snaps than we thought, and he's a red zone threat, but what if he also then gets targets per route?
I know you have to get a lot of things right.
You named so many things he has to get right, and like, could he just be the guy you need in week 17? Sure, but like, you can make the argument for anyone. I'm more looking at what the bulk of the distribution
some weird
looks
dude's
like.
gonna bury us, and we're gonna have to live with that. But but like, you don't have to get every single thing right in a fantasy season. You know, like I was out on Zay Jones last year. That was a mistake.
Hey, was it?
Well, he had a good year. You know, I certainly
caught like 70 passes for like 800 yards.
He had a big game in the right week.
Congrats, Zay. Big deal.
But you don't have to get everything right. I didn't have enough Josh Jacobs last year. You can survive some things.
Real broken up about not getting Zay Jones 823 yards. Yeah. That ruined my year.
You hate Zay Jones.
He actually did have 823 yards. Oh my god!
Wait, did you riff that correctly?
I did. I riffed it.
You riffed that?
I'm dead serious.
That's the sickest thing I've ever. You act like I am the sick one here. You just ripped Zay Jones' exact yardage total off the top of your head.
I'm horrified.
I do know stats sometimes. I was guessing, but I riffed that. Yeah, it ruined my fall. Didn't get those 82 Zay Jones catches.
Honestly, this is so upsetting. You hate Zay Jones. Everybody else loves Zay Jones.
I really hated missing that age 27 breakout. Yeah, that was bad. That was a huge miss by me. Sorry. I'm sorry.
No, I agree. We don't have to get everything right. We're gonna miss on some stuff. I think Kincaid is one I'm okay missing on. All right, let's talk some of the guys who have come out of nowhere, because this is the guys who've created their own hype. I would say the two guys who come to mind, but please mention anyone else. Deneric Prince and recently Demario Douglas, this 5'8" wide receiver who was a 6th round pick by the Patriots, kind of a gadgety type dude, but obviously a pretty wide open depth chart, and probably not great for Juju Smith-Schuster if there's an explosive slot receiver on the roster. There's also Kendrick Bourne, also an explosive slot receiver on this roster, but he's in the doghouse. So thoughts on those two?
I'll go first on Douglas. Right, this is like a very common Patriots camp. Like, the Patriots are a very well covered team. For one, they have like 5 or 6 beat writers. Everyone's kind of like always hunting for scoops, like trying to find like the couch cushion type player that they can hype. Everyone wants to like find the unique angle. I mean, who was the tight end? Who's the infamous tight end?
Dude.
It happened with Kimbrel Tompkins. It happened with the tight end, Zach Sudfeld.
Zach Sudfeld.
Yeah. Oh my!
It's a pretty common Patriots phenomenon, and it's kind of also the Chiefs' problem, where it's like no one knows who to hype, because now like people are all over like Hunter Henry again, like where it's like there's so many guys.
Henry's a good pick, so let's not slander him.
No one's really standing out, so kind of just everyone's getting hyped a little bit. But the Patriots too just do weird things. Like, this could be like a Bill Belichick mind game. Just whatever. Give the Demario Douglas first team reps for 2 weeks, and then then he's like not even
getting first team reps.
I know. But then he's like not even active in week. So the Patriots are a team where you have to be really careful, because the coaching staff misleads as much as any coaching staff, and it's a really, really well covered team. Where like I haven't seen like a drum beat yet with Douglas. I'll say.
Okay.
It could be just one person's observation.
Honestly, if I saw a drum beat with Douglas, I wouldn't care. He's like 4th year Liberty breakout, and then goes in the 6th round.
Wouldn't you care for what it means for the other receivers, particularly Juju?
I guess maybe it would if I was ever drafting Juju, but I don't think I have him.
Yeah, we don't draft Juju anyways.
And I will also say, probably not. Honestly, like they paid Juju like $30 million. Like, it's tied to more like incentive based than it was for Jacoby leaving, but round about.
They paid Jonnu Smith a bunch of money. I mean, these guys are. I think they're like required to just give out a certain amount of money each year.
Well, the Jonnu Smith year they were, because they were way not near the cash floor or whatever, so they had to. But I mean, like, I guess like the off-season sort of narrative is a movement from our prior. Like, it is good, all things considered, that player X is lighting up camp, that the coach mentioned him. Like, that's not nothing, right? But how far does it move us from our prior? To me, it's not a lot. It's not nothing. But my prior was so low on Demario Douglas that, like, I mean, he was a guy who I knew nothing about in the draft, and then I looked him up. I was like, I understand why.
Yeah, your prior. Let's be honest. Your prior was who?
Yeah, exactly. My prior was like, is he on the UDFA list for blurbs? No, he's not on the UD. And they took him in the 6th round. Oh my god. So, and I looked at him and I'm like, yeah, of course. He was like 4th year breakout at Liberty with no draft capital. He looks like a guy who gets cut like at the end of training camp. So if it's something where like I see a clear path to this guy was previously good and then has a chance to usurp someone ahead of him, and then that's a successful outcome, that's something that means something for fantasy, I'll listen to the drum beat. And like that was the case with Isaiah Pacheco, where the guy in front of him was terrible, Clyde Edwards-Helaire. So it's easy to see a case where, like, even if I didn't love Pacheco coming out of college, my prior wasn't great on him. My prior on
also it's running back where things are more chaotic.
So,
Deneric Prince is an interesting one because he's looking more like a pass catcher, and so it's kind of like he's probably a year, 2024 Jerick McKinnon replacement, I would guess. But it's made me like a little more nervous about McKinnon, that you have this UDFA running back who's lighting it up specifically as a pass catcher. He probably doesn't have the pass blocking down, so I don't know that maybe you want to get that carried away, but he's sort of an interesting dude where like this might be real, this hype, but it might be 2024 hype, and are we going to remember the 2023 hype in 2024? But it probably indicates some level of skill, but does he even really have a chance of getting on the field as a pass blocker?
It would probably require an injury, probably to McKinnon or Pacheco or CEH. I mean, CEH, unfortunately, from what the Chiefs beat writer told us on the show last week, like he's going to be involved apparently. So that stinks.
I don't know what's going on with the Chiefs, man.
But Prince will be like a priority waiver ad in managed teams this year, probably like 3 times. Totally. Just in case, like a break glass, just in an emergency situation.
Yeah, like how you added Jordan Mason like 3 times last year.
Yes,
it's totally the same. Yeah. By another guy apparently.
That's perfect. That's like the exact situation. That's really good.
Hunter Henry is a dude I want to mention who's getting hype as like the favorite target. And this is another archetype we see. Like this guy's his favorite target. He can't stop throwing to this guy. I remember the Patriots, you mentioned, Pat, they're a well-covered team. It's so true. Like guys will actually chart out like how many receptions every player got in that practice. I remember one of the all-time like should not have paid attention to this was Damian Harris getting a ton of dump off passes in a practice. It's like, dude, Damian Harris caught like 9 balls this morning. Like they're going to use him as a pass catcher. He like didn't see a single reception all season. It's just, but that's one of the things we're seeing with Hunter Henry, all this talk about him just like kind of targeting him. We're seeing that in a few other spots. Does that do anything for you?
Just a little bit, because last year with the Patriots, nothing made sense in the receiver core, like the skill core. Like I thought the biggest problem with the Patriots skill core last year was like no one had a defined role. Like there was just it seemed like every week like the roles were different, and it never made any sense that Hunter Henry wasn't like the primary red zone guy. He kind of was in 2021 with Mac Jones. So to me, it's like, okay, we got a real offensive coordinator back. We're going to establish roles again. Like, why would Hunter Henry not be the primary red zone guy? So the Hunter Henry stuff has kind of made me like raise my eyebrow, but like, okay, maybe sanity is returning to the skill core. Like they're going to have set roles. The players are going to know like what's expected of them on a weekly basis. And like that kind of struck me as like sanity returning to the way the Patriots like deploy their offense. But then again, I mean, it's his 8th year in the league. Like there's not much juice left to squeeze there with Hunter Henry. But it struck me as sanity returning to the Patriots skill core.
There's like useful tight end 2 spike week juice in that like he goes so late. Like he's one like we had the Dawson Knox versus Dalton Kincaid debate. Like in best ball, Mike Gesicki goes ahead of him. Like Mike Gesicki is locked in for playing less than 50% of these snaps. Like can't block, only plays in the slot. Like, yeah, he looks like a backup tight end, frankly. And then Hunter Henry last year performed well in open score. He's been productive throughout his career. They're paying him a ton of money, and they're not doing that to Mike Gesicki. Like it's another one where like it doesn't move my prior much. It just happens to be that my prior on Hunter Henry was that like he's a starting tight end for an offense that I think improves.
I'll tell you one thing about Hunter Henry. I'm running him back against an Eagles week 1 stack, folks. That's what I'm doing.
I love it.
I know that I think Kerrane's about to go rapid fire, but just real quick. He's about to turn 29, Hunter Henry. What do you think his career high for yards is?
I don't want to talk.
800?
728.
Keep going down.
Oof.
630.
652 is Hunter Henry's career high for yards.
Don't love that.
Don't love that.
All right, let's do a little rapid fire on some of these like super hype situations. If you're buying in, if you're like willing to essentially start taking this guy earlier in drafts than you already would have. Let's start with Brandon Aiyuk, who's been kind of the star of 49ers camp.
Yeah.
But obviously a lot of mouths to feed there.
I'm going to be out because like really what's like the genuine upside there? And like last year happened with Deebo Samuel having a campaign that can't possibly be as bad again this year. It's like this where like how much more upside could there really be for Brandon Aiyuk? I'd say I'm
out. It's a fine pick. It's And the camp hype isn't doing it for me. It's been the whole time.
I mean, he's going, at least according to Fantasy Pros ADP, he's going at wide receiver 30. So that's like after Pittman, after Christian Kirk.
That's not on underdog. He's wide receiver 28, but he's like a early 5th round pick.
Yeah, I mean that's a tough call. I don't know. I don't when I draft a 0 RB team, I feel pretty good about getting him as like my wide receiver 3 or 4. You know, like I feel like you could do a lot worse.
I think last year was just a ceiling: 78 catches, 1,000 yards, 8 touchdowns. Like the CMC, Kittle, and Deebo. Like, could you have like literally 3 All Pros for your target competition?
Yeah.
It's kind of how
well,
much.
Deebo's another guy. He's apparently this is a best shape of his life narrative, which is a huge narrative. Also, best shape of his life usually does not involve your coach saying this guy won't stop sending me shirtless photos. But Deebo's best shape of his life is documented through text messages to his head coach. Is that bullish or bearish?
No, that's real bullish. And
that's analytics.
We talk about Rob, like Deebo had like the ultimate distraction off season last year. Didn't have any of that this year. Didn't make his stats made no sense last year. He's going to be way better this year.
Any thoughts on Deebo, guys?
I draft Deebo a decent amount because he goes in a range where like DK Metcalf goes, and anytime those two guys are on the board, I'm like, give me Deebo.
Well, the Niners reporter who talked to us the other day said the rushing thing is quote over for Deebo.
He did say that, which that could be good.
That's good. I think that's good, dude.
Because he was unsustainably hot on the touchdowns 2 years ago, and if you're getting these carries and they're not including touchdowns, it basically is like cannon fodder.
It's not good in the context of Brandon Aiyuk having a great camp. It's good if you're the clear number 1 wide receiver.
I think he is the clear number 1 wide receiver.
I disagree. I say it's Aiyuk.
I think it's Deebo, man.
All right. Okay. So difference of opinion. Shirtless. Pat's more into shirtless picks than Denny. We learned that. All right.
Calvin. It's ironic because Denny doesn't have sleeves, so you'd think it'd be the other way.
Denny is out here showing off the guns.
He's the one. Calvin Ridley. He's getting the teammate buzz. He's getting the video. This is another thing. The making the rounds on Twitter with your video. Calvin Ridley's the king of that right now. Are you willing to take him up as he rises into the early to mid 3rd round?
I wanted to be out on Ridley, but it was something that made sense on paper. And he basically is like wowing Jaguars camp. It sounds like people are like, wow, this is like what a number 1 receiver looks like. And I'm 5 games in 2 years. 5 games in 2 years. That's a problem. And he was old when he entered the league. He's not like the biggest guy. He relies like a lot on like just being an elite tactician, but he is that. And I'm getting sucked in on Calvin Ridley.
I'm not. I was fine with him before this rise, but like I think his price was about right. Where like upside is great, risk is extremely high for a guy who's played 5 games in 2 years or whatever. And this is just like complete illogical rise in price. Like if you were drafting him in the 3rd round and like you were like, oh, he's good. I forgot that's why I was drafting him. He's fast. Oh, that the video it showed he was fast. Like that makes no sense to me. A price rise at this point.
From what I understand, this Doug Peterson offense is designed to spread targets around, and like it's just like simply not going to funnel targets to one guy. So that makes me a little nervous about Ridley. But all the hype from him running fast in camp gives me FOMO. I would be lying.
It does. It gives me FOMO. That's a FOMO one for me.
Well,
all right, JSN we talked is looking awesome. Are you willing to take him if he goes into like the late 5th? Is that a dumb pick or a he's their best receiver already pick?
It's dumb because it's like he could have the greatest camp in history, and he's just not going to have a higher target share than either DK Metcalf or Tyler Lockett. I guess maybe he could than DK, but like DK is still going to be playing the most important snaps, like being like the number 1 guy in the red zone. And it's just the guys ahead of him are just so established and so good.
What do you think,
all right, last one. Let's go that Denny. I want to hear from you on this one. Mack Hollins looking like an absolute like he looks like a warrior from before we like fully knew how
he looks like the
worked.
photos of Sasquatch, like the long away photos of Sasquatch. You're like, oh, that thing's like 7
he
feet
refuses
tall
to eat with utensils. I mean, this guy.
Oh, his testosterone is off the charts. It's actually. I mean, the doctors need to really monitor that. It's medically dangerous how high his T is. Yeah, I mean it's fun. I think it's fun. Like he looks like he should be on Game of Thrones, like taking over a civilization and all that stuff. But where are the targets going to come from? Like it's just
he'll make his own targets, dude.
I mean I'm sure it'll be really cool when one of his 2 targets goes for like a dominant sideline catch. Okay. But it's just there's just not volume there. I have zero interest in Mack Hollins.
I just wanted you to tell me.
Yeah,
how
thank you. I
was.
appreciate it. Any chance?
I haven't considered drafting him once. I just wanted you to talk about how his C levels are through the roof.
Thank you.
Yeah, dangerously high.
All right, guys. This will do it for our training camp rundown here. Thanks so much for joining me to go through everything. Tell the people about what you got going on at rotoworld.com.
News, lots of news, and draft guide updates. I'm assuming Denny's gonna have some one-off articles. I'm assuming Kyle's gonna have some one-off articles.
I got some stuff in the hopper officially. So,
guys, I wrote recently about the Cowboys' supposed embrace of analytics. You should read that one.
Oh yeah, that was really interesting, actually. Yeah. Check it out. And yeah, there's so much news right now. We're in like the peak of training camp news. Really, the peak is kind of before the games begin. We're like the initial sorting is going on. And keep it locked to rotoworld.com.
Love it. Sign up for Legendary Upside if you have not done so. I still do have some $50 underdog credits. So if you sign up for a yearly subscription to Legendary Upside, legendaryupside.com. Fill out a form, which will be in the description of this video. The link to where you go fill out that form. Give me your username. I'll send it over to Underdog and get a $50 credit while supplies last. Thank you guys again. This was a blast. Let's draft some good teams. Let's draft some good teams this year. And I'll be drafting a good team with you on Thursday.
Hey, Pat, we'll see you Thursday.
Love it. Later. Oh, I think I actually have a video that I can play to close this out. Let's do it.